Bachu County. The total turnover in this warehouse contributes about 3% of the national cotton production. We decided to leave for Xinjiang on March 27th when the cotton issue was widely discussed on the social media platforms. On one hand, we saw lots of angers from Chinese consumers, while on the other, there are lots of extreme languages being used by Western medias and the US government. Forced labor, genocide. These are the words that I've only remember reading in history books or movies, but never imagined such words can be associated or applied to a civilized modern society. Frankly speaking, if indeed there were such things existing, we should definitely try to fix it. And as journalists, it is our job to record the truth, facilitate change, and also supervise. I also don't want to draw any conclusion until I see the reality myself on spot. So we got the permission internally and booked the tickets. We left from Hangzhou as we were filming there on 26th and left for乌鲁木齐. While we were packing, I'm trying to streamline all these things. First of all, why were the US government and BCI since last year starting to make a fuss over a bale of cotton? This cotton planting industry has been existing for ages, but what triggered this sudden attention to it? Any further agendas behind this act? After the cotton issue, what's the next target? And the most important thing, if we are to document a wholesome aspect of lives in Xinjiang, where shall we start? Forced labor, putting politics aside, frankly speaking, to me, using this phrase to describe the cotton industry in Xinjiang or any major cotton production area in the world is not very logical. I will tell you why. Xinjiang contributes about 85% of the total cotton production in China, and China is one of the 4 largest cotton production areas in the world and imports heavily every year from abroad. It is impossible for any economy to maintain its scale and competitiveness through forced labor. Also, the plantation economy may have existed in other areas of the world, but definitely not in China. Now, with machine production gets more popular and human labor getting more expensive, partially also because the population dividend is fading in China, it would be a much rational choice for any business entities and institutions to choose machine as a cheaper substitute. Secondly, textile has been one of the pillar industries in China's economic development since we joined the WTO in 2001. The US government thinks that China's target price-based subsidy, which intended to support cotton farmers' income since 2017, unfairly made Xinjiang a huge cotton field and a global competitor. But the US government seemed to have left out the easiest explanation of why Xinjiang supplies most of China's cotton: its favorable natural conditions and climate. Also, the mechanization of cotton harvest is easy to apply to the sparsely populated land. There are advantages of Xinjiang cotton. If we go back to politics, a disrupted cotton industry in Xinjiang would risk destabilizing the society. Currently, this industry in Xinjiang contributes employment to Uyghur people, as most cotton production center in Xinjiang is densely populated by Uyghur community, and cotton planting, textile manufacturing are key income sources for them. If this industry is disrupted or destroyed, unemployment will be caused, which is a key factor to ensure social stability. Xinjiang had been subject to frequent extremist activities, and it is through Chinese government's continuous effort for decades to combat with such divisive forces, a harmonious and stable society is created. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in last January, just a few days before he stepped down, that after careful examination of the available facts, he had determined that since at least March 2017, Chinese government had committed genocide against Muslim Uyghurs in Xinjiang, but he did not list any fact at all. It looked more like his last act, trying so hard to be remembered for his aggressive attitude towards China and trying to instigate riot among Chinese people by destroying a healthy industry in Xinjiang. We stayed in southern Xinjiang for about a week, and I'm going to walk you through my experience there. Seeing a real Xinjiang turned out also to be a lovely and pleasant memory for myself. I chose Kashgar Prefecture. Kashgar is a city in southern Xinjiang, a major cotton-producing region, with Uyghur residents contributes 98% of the population. We also arranged trips to Bachu County and a nearby city to Kashgar, Tumu舒克. Out of the cotton field, we also had chances to witness a first direct flight between Beijing and Tumu舒克city. That was also very interesting. 都是在 I met a lot of people in these three places and spoke to them extensively on their daily life. Before I throw myself into the cotton field, I spent a night in乌鲁木齐 and paid my first visit to the Grand Bazaar in 二道桥, a Uyghur neighborhood in 乌鲁木齐. When I arrived at the bazaar, it was about 8 p.m. in the evening, and the market was about to close. However, still, many people dropped by for the naan bread stall. And you can tell most of those shoppers are from neighborhood. Food corner was still very crowded, and not only tourists, but lots of locals are dining there too. There were security checks upon entering the bazaar, but the process was quick and friendly, with thermal screening as preventive measures for the COVID-19. My driver told me that Xinjiang is probably one of the safest cities in China, and you can leave your door open at night and you're okay. That's what he told me. So we did a live broadcasting of the bazaar on Weibo to show people what is going on in乌鲁木齐. I caught a flight to图木舒克 the next morning, a city I've never heard of and administrated by the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corp, or XPCC. Our parents' generation may have clear understanding towards XPCC because their generation was the one mobilized to join XPCC to support Xinjiang construction. While in our generation, we only have very vague impression upon it. I've never met anyone from XPCC before in my life, and we relate XPCC to patriot and passionate youth. Actually, XPCC is much more than that. Very productive workers they are. The GDP of XPCC reached about 290 billion yuan, contributing a third of China's total cotton output. Plus the food production, XPCC means a lot to Chinese food security and cotton supply. I'll come back to XPCC later. I didn't stop in图木舒克 first, but went directly to the cotton field in Bachu County to interview Uyghur cotton farmers. Bachu is a typical Uyghur county. Han people only makes about 2% of the total population. We went straight to the cotton field upon arrival. It was sowing season at the end of March. The first impression I've got was the clean, neatly machine-pressed field in a vast land. And Beidou-powered seed drills was plowing with only very few workers operating the machine and tidying up the field on the edge. I talked to Abu Kelimu, who was in charge of the local agriculture co-op, and that is my first interview in Xinjiang. He laughed at my question. I asked him, is there an issue of forced labor? He laughed at me and explained that people choose to work to make a living, simple and universal as that.
我们新疆人从来没有被强制劳动，我们新疆人生活很自由。
His co-op has about 5,000 mu cotton field, run by several dozens of cotton farmers. And thanks to the machines, a couple of farmers can take care of 100 mu field. That's what he said. In the field, we met another young man who is also part of the co-op that Abu Kelimu leads. He is a millennial. He was there to help his parents to manage the cotton field. He told me he just graduated from college last year and he didn't find the job he wanted due to COVID-19 pandemic last year. So he came back to plant cotton first and helping his parents. When market is back, he said he wishes to apply for a public servant exam and pursue his career in the government. When I asked about his career goals, that's what he told me.
有没有这个强迫用工啊什么的？没有这种问题。
没有。如果考公务员考试，然后找一份好工作，像这种农村这种农民不太多。
Bachu plays a key role in Kashgar's cotton industry. Following the textile supply chain, we visited a yarn factory and its logistics center. Rather ignorant, I was surprised to learn that the well-packed cottons can actually be stored openly. No rain can permeate the hard-squeezed bale of cottons. The managers in the yarn factory told me that the factory was already this modern, back to 10 years ago, and there was never labor forced to work. And in fact, not much labor was actually needed here. If we were talking about migrant workers coming to Xinjiang to pick cottons, they were definitely not forced. They were there to make some money. I'll give you an example. If you understand how Amazon hires temporary workers from all across America to get ready for peak Christmas season orders, you should understand why people come to Xinjiang during cotton harvest seasons. This is based on supply and demand principles of the labor market, definitely not forced labor. Plus, they are all rewarded handsomely. While we were busy editing in the evening, I got a surprise. I was very hungry and opened my Meituan delivery app to test my luck, and you know what? In 30 minutes time, a handsome Uyghur gentleman, the delivery man, showed up with a Xinjiang local snack I ordered. It was not in Beijing or Shanghai, but Bachu. and we have food delivery service handy. We left for Tumu Shuke the next day. Apart from cotton and textile industry, Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps also incubated other employment opportunities through attracting investments from outside. A dairy firm started operation recently, and we saw a highly automated production line in a yarn factory there too. We did something a bit creative in Tumu Shuke. We dined in a local Uyghur restaurant called Afanti and thought it might be a good idea to do a live broadcasting there. By the way, I personally never run into anyone who stopped me from filming anything. The owner of the restaurant once worked in a hospital in乌鲁木齐, decided to quit his job and found his restaurant business in his hometown, Tumu Shuke. I liked the delicious food he offered, and I learned that he made a decent money out of it, managing 2 restaurants. With more than 20 staff he hired, he also offered delivery service via Ele.me platform, with a ticket size of about 25 yuan for each delivery. He and his partner were ready to expand their business to a restaurant chain, as what he told me.
因为家里面就我一个儿子，然后我想回到父母身边，然后就思来想去辞职以后，我就想经商。从第一间100平米的店，现在跟我的一个兄弟合伙注册公司，现在事业还可以，我们会继续努力。
And by the way, Uyghur himself, he is the 3rd generation of XPCC, with his father and grandfather all served XPCC and participated in the local construction over the decades. The live broadcast was on Facebook, Twitter, and Weibo, and we hope to reflect the real life of Uyghur people in the country, and also the truth speaks for themselves. In day 3, we were leaving Tumu Shuke for Kashgar. By then, we have really seen enough to know that the forced labor or genocide were definitely malicious lies. I've never been to Kashgar before, and we're eager to check out the cosmopolitan life there as the largest city in southern Xinjiang. Immediately after arrival to the old town, I was totally mesmerized by this ancient city, Kashgar. Islam, Buddhism, and Christianity all left footprints in this city with the clash of Chinese, Roman, Indian, and Egyptian civilizations. The color in Kashgar Old Town reminded me of Morocco. The city is bustling with vibrance and life. Right in front of the Edigal Mosque, a Uyghur gentleman who I randomly bumped into on the square after he finished his prayer in the mosque talked to us about the daily religious practices and his life in Kashgar. This was also live reported on CGTN. 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and people kept entering the mosque to practice their daily prayer. I could hardly relate the so-called genocide to any of these scenes right in front of me. In Xinjiang, Uyghur population has more than doubled in the past 40 years and reached 12 million. The growth rate of Uyghur population outpaced the total population growth, other ethnic minorities' growth, and Han people's growth in Xinjiang. What kind of genocide can result in such high population growth? We sat there and watched the people finishing their rituals, leaving the mosque while the sunset started to follow after 8 p.m. The Edigal Mosque is fascinating. There were greens everywhere, the Muslim green. The views were picturesque, combined with earth-colored wall, a crimson carpet, and crystal blue sky. I filmed the BizBeat episode in Old Town the second day in Kashgar and trying to summarize what I've seen. While we were filming, we happened to run into kids off school in the afternoon, 2 or 3 in the beginning, and in a while there were at least 15 kids around me. They were not camera shy at all. Instead, they chit-chatted around me and looked curiously into the camera. I loved those footages and posted some on Twitter. Surprisingly, you know what happened? Some commented on my Twitter and said a kid was actually afraid of me with his horrified eyes. Well, I've never thought such deliberately twisted misinterpretation would happen to me so quickly this time. So from this logic onwards, the organized, twisted media reports from Western media should not be a surprise to us. Apparently, there are groups of people abroad have been practicing this for a very long time. I fell in love with Xinjiang and will be back myself soon. I want to summarize my trip this time with a simple sentence. I did a great search there. I left no stone unturned and couldn't find a trace of forced labor or genocide. Let us cherish Xinjiang together. A fair global economic cooperation and competition should not be based on attempts to instigate riots to destroy peace and prosperity in order to reach one's own selfish goals.